Welcome to the Scratch Golfer's Mindset Podcast. My name is Paul Salter, and I'm a triple-digit golfer on a quest to become a scratch golfer. I'm also a high-performance mindset coach and credentialed hypnotherapist with 15 years of experience helping high performers from all walks of life get unstuck and unlock their full potential. Join me each week as I not only detail my journey, but make mastering the mental game of golf simple, tangible, and relatable so that you can overcome the mental hazards keeping you stuck in the proverbial bunker of poor performance. Hey, fellow golfer. Welcome back to another episode of the Scratch Golfer's Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Salter, the golf hypnotherapist, and I am thrilled to introduce you to Mr. Henry Stetina, who is the Director of Player Development at New Mexico State University's PGA Golf Management Program. And Henry's list of experiences, professionally and personally, his list of golf-specific accomplishments is nothing short of incredible. And in today's conversation, he's kind enough to share his extensive expertise, specifically offering you valuable insights into simplifying your short game, addressing and conquering the yips, and the importance of setting realistic expectations to strive for consistent improvement. Whether you're aiming to break 90 or you're on your way to becoming a scratch golfer, the advice and the mental strategies you will glean from this episode will inspire you and empower you to play better, smarter, enjoyable golf. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Mr. Henry Stetina to the show. Hey, Henry, thank you so much for joining me on an episode of the Scratch Golfer's Mindset Podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to the chat. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive in. Let's build a foundation. Who is Henry? Tell us more about what you do, as well as your background and experience in the game of golf.
Sure. So I'm a PGA golf professional. I work for the New Mexico State University's PGA Golf Management Program. I'm the Director of Player Development. And so I spend most of my time coaching college students who are interested in pursuing a career in the golf industry on how to play better golf and how to give better golf lessons. I also spend a little bit of time over at a nearby golf course called Red Hot Golf Club, where I operate a pretty large PGA Junior League program. And I kind of specialize in junior golf. I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is about 4 hours north of where I'm at now. Played golf throughout my childhood into high school, and then ended up playing 2 years of junior college golf before transferring to New Mexico State, where I concluded my degree and got my PGA membership. Throughout that time, I met my current wife, Kelly Stetina, who is also a lifelong golfer, ex-Division I player and a PGA member. Together, we've been married. We just celebrated 12 years of marriage about a week and a half ago, and we have two daughters. They're 10 and 8 years old, and they're both enjoying the game as well as other sports and activities. So we both come from golfing families. We've been in the game our whole lives, and we're introducing our kids to the game as well.
I love that. And of all the hats you wear that you just described, I think it's very important to note that you also somehow find time to produce a ton of valuable social media content as well, especially you just video-rich content that is so informative. So I will plug this many times. Go follow Henry on social media because it is a wealth, a library in and of itself of learning. But where I want to direct us, Henry, and there's so many directions to go, is I want to start here. Help us simplify the short game. What common mistakes are you seeing on or around the green that are easy to start overcoming to play better golf?
I think that there's a couple of ways we could go with the conversation. One of them has to do with expectations. Decade golf is something that I've come across over the past few years and have become quite a proponent of because of the simplicity, the clarity, the alteration in a person's mindset as to what exactly they should be doing. Most players have too high of expectations. They think they should make all their putts within 10 feet and hit it close with a wedge in their hand, and all these things that we see on TV, which is basically a highlight reel of the best players playing their best shots on a round when they're playing really well. And so it doesn't really reflect the tour average, much less what we're capable of as recreational golfers. So that would be, one area that a person could certainly go down. Another, I think that a lot of people might need to start with is the technique itself. A lot of people don't have a clear concept of the golf swing, and I refer to it as the golf swing because if we looked up swinging in the dictionary, we would find that it's a defined term. It's a to and fro motion while suspended from an axis. A pendulum is an example of a swinging motion. And in putting, we've heard lots of people reference creating a pendulum-like stroke. And so if we were to look at that, at what that really meant, a person might get a more clear understanding of the swing and then be able to produce it far more easily. And so oftentimes around the greens, or on the greens, I should say, I'll have a player position the club up into their belly button, the butt of the club up into their belly button, like they were anchoring it, and then grip down on the shaft and make a putting stroke. That would be a true pendulum because it's got a point of axis, an anchoring point, and is now deemed against the rules of golf for obvious reasons. And so that's kind of where I start a player to show them what that pendulum-like stroke might be. And then we end up holding it traditionally by the grip and learn to manage that space between the club and the person's center, that point of axis. And we formulate a capital Y formed by the shaft and the forearms. And we work towards just maintaining that relationship during the motion. It really quiets down the excess movement that most players have with the hands and wrists, and it creates a very normal looking motion. And all we do is just continue to build on that. We give them a different club, a 7-iron, and learn to chip off the green, and then a pitching wedge, and making a bigger swing, but maintaining some of those characteristics of a swinging motion. Ultimately, continuing all the way to the full swing and learning to recognize what that might look like when the wrists are hinging.
I love that. There's such a central focus on the technique. And the reason I keep bringing this up is because coming to the game, I played in high school. I know you're not too familiar, Henry. And then I took, a 15 to 18 year hiatus. So coming back to the game, I had a wealth of knowledge in my background simply because of social media and all the videos I can find on poor technique and great technique. But for me, early on as I got back into it, my struggle was lack of technique awareness and knowledge, and also lack of commitment, because I know there's the bump and run, there's a flop shot, there's this shot, the rodeo shot, and now I'm just making up shot names. But I love to hear how you focus on this core tenet. It's the pendulum. It's your core swing, if you will. And then I love how you said you start building from that. You change clubs, you get a little further, and all the way to developing that full swing. And I'm curious to know, someone who's approaching the game, let's use for simplicity, they're shooting in the 90s, they're on their way to their 80s. How do you help set appropriate expectations from both chipping and then putting to temper expectations with potential outcomes?
So I really enjoy working with players looking to break 90.
Okay. You're talking to one.
There's a bunch of them. That is an area that I recall, back when I was learning the game, that was really enjoyable for me because I just turned par into a bogey. I was a bogey golfer. If you can bogey all the holes, you shoot 90. And so I think it's very achievable on a par 4 to think of just getting the ball in play. It doesn't need to be long. It doesn't need to be in the fairway, but it does need to be in play. You need to have an ability to access, another shot. So when that ball's in play, then we need to play a respectable approach shot. Again, it doesn't need to be on the green. It just needs to be around the green. And from there, we need to chip it onto the green and then 2-putt. And if we can do that and make it 5 on a par 4, that would become our personal par. A double bogey might be perceived as a bogey, and a par might be perceived as a birdie. And so we can learn to change our approach to playing the game to achieve bogey on each of the holes, and then learn to reduce the score from there. So I think that's a very enjoyable part of the game. Simply put, it may have even occurred that, around the green, all we need to do is chip it onto the green and then two putt. I mean, that'd be pretty common expectation for what a person might achieve there. And then what I also like to do, going back to some of those expectations, I like to reference some of the tour player stats. Obviously, it's a far greater level of achievement and performance, but it can be very revealing for any skill level. I oftentimes reference, or I'll ask a player, how many putts do you think you'll make from this distance? And I have a ball laid down 8 feet from the hole. What do you think the tour players make from this distance? And they'll say 75% or 80% or whatever. And it really is 50. It's 50% from 8 feet. And so we realize that it's really just the flip of a coin as to whether a person makes it or not.
I love that.
Yeah, from 20 feet, it's interesting too, because a lot of players will think it's significantly higher than what the tour players do. It's really slightly less than 20%, 1 out of 5. And so when we start to look at those actualities of the PGA Tour, a lot of players will realize, wow, they're not as good as I thought they were, which is kind of interesting because they're the best players in the world. But what I see happens is it relieves their stress from having to be perfect, from having these expectations that are so high that cause them anxiety when they don't achieve them. And then it allows them to be more patient during a round of golf, realizing that, hey, I'm okay. I'm doing just fine. I'm not doing poorly. I don't need to beat myself up. I can actually, gain some momentum and maybe get lucky at the end of the round and make 1 or 2 of these, as opposed to beating myself up all day and just completely ruining my round.
I love that. You're right. Like, this is such a beautiful example of the power of data to help us temper expectations. I always like to come back to that gap between expectation and reality is what invites in frustration, anger, defeatism, whatever it may be. But when we can temper our expectation and literally learn, Scotty Scheffler, the best in the world, he's making this 20% of the time. Oh, okay. I don't have to make it 50% of the time like I previously thought. It allows you to play freely, which is a dangerous, high potential place to play.
Yep. I love how you said that, freely, because that's exactly what I experienced personally and with some of the players that I coach is when we have a more realistic expectation, it really frees us up to make our best shot that we're capable of making.
Yeah. So continue with that, the short game theme here. This is a topic I've become fascinated with. I've had a lot of great discussions with a gentleman named Jim Waldron, Ryan Mokay. Henry and I are recording this late October. It'll come out shortly after here. But the yips. Someone comes to you, either they've self-diagnosed themselves with the yips or maybe they've used other verbiage. How do you work through that with your players? So generally speaking, for most players, the yips is a combination of 2 things. It could be the fact that they have a physical flaw in their putting stroke. Maybe they've developed some kind of a funky compensation that causes them to miss more putts than they should make, or miss more putts than they should. And then it translates into low confidence and fear of failure and starting to actually visualize missing. And it's this snowball effect causing for more and more troubles within this close range of the hole. And then ultimately we call them the yips. And so first and foremost, I think a person should take a peek at their putting stroke to make sure that some things are pretty normal. I referenced the pendulum-like stroke. I think that's very helpful for players to start with. One thing I will add on the technique aspect of it is if we put an imaginary line across our shoulders or our arms, and we looked at the putter face should be perpendicular to that line. And so as we make a stroke or a swing, the putter face or the club face should stay perpendicular to that line across our arms. If we're opening it or closing it, that's going to cause a lot of challenges. And so the putter will stay square to us. It'll stay square to the arc of the stroke.
it will not stay square to the target.
Yep.
It will only be square to the target when it passes our center point. And so some of that geometry of the stroke, I think, is really helpful. Once we get beyond that, and a person doesn't have to be perfect with it, obviously, it does become quite mental. I think a lot of people have a fear of failure. They start to visualize themselves missing. They're recalling all of their poor attempts. They're imagining themselves missing in front of a group of people who they don't want to miss in front of. And so it causes a lot of tension and anxiety. In those cases, I tend to help them with reading the putt, visualize the ball going into the hole, maybe pick an entry point on the hole, something small, a blade of grass, discoloration, and then really learning to discipline themselves to stay focused on the outcome that they want. Seeing that ball going into the hole, and then evaluating them on how well they can maintain that visualization throughout the stroke. Because it is possible for a person to have the correct intention to start the stroke and then become fearful and replace it with a negative, unwanted visualization and then yip it.
Love that. So I'm curious because I hear you 100% on just the fear that develops. It's the fear of embarrassment, judgment, rejection by our peers, the fear of failure in front of our peers. On the technical side of things, for someone who is struggling, let's say specifically with those short putts, those 3 to 4 footers, what are some of the basic fundamentals you would encourage them to review and really reassess all of their ducks in a row from a technical fundamental standpoint?
Are we talking physically?
Yes, let's talk physically.
Okay, so a few things that I like to look for. Number one is the way we hold the club. For all the clubs except for the putter, we tend to put the club in the fingers of the hand. Mm-hmm. For putting, I recommend the player put the club in the lifeline of the lead hand. Uh-huh. So for a right-handed golfer, the left edge of the putter, the left portion of that flat part of the grip in the front, should line up with the lifeline of their left hand. That's going to position the shaft through the forearm and create the forearm and the shaft on the same plane, as opposed to having it down in the fingers, which would put the shaft and the forearm on 2 different planes.
That makes sense.
A person who does that might feel like their wrists are more solid or locked in. That's a good thing, especially for yippers.
Yeah. So
that would be the first thing that I would look at. The next is how they sold the putter. So we want to get the putter's not flat on the bottom. It's actually arced a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so if it's sold correctly, the heel and the toe should be equally off the ground. Okay. Sometimes I'll say, imagine a thumbtack under the putter, under the sight line, and you're just placing that tack into the turf. And so with a putter that's sold correctly, a player needs to get their eyes over the golf ball. For a lot of players who struggle with this, the toe of the club is off of the ground and the eyes are inside the target line. It's because the putter is too long. And so they need to grip down on the putter, which brings them closer to it and allows them to sold the putter better. If they need to, they'll need to cut their putter down.
Interesting.
So
yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, so that's really important. I like to have the putter in the center of the stance.
Okay.
Because that would be the point underneath our body's center, which would allow for that pendulum-like motion. Aiming the putter is obviously important, especially from close distance. It's far more important than distance control is at that distance. And so having our eyes over the ball, our eyes need to track the target line, as opposed to turning and kind of becoming more cockeyed with it. So for example, when we're standing vertically, normally, our eyes turn with the horizon. The eye line turns with the shoulder line, parallel to the shoulders. And so when we bend over, our eyes are now parallel to the target line and need to remain parallel to the target line as they look towards the target. So I think a player's setup is critical, obviously. And then when it comes down to the stroke, a lot more things. when it comes to the stroke, it's going to be a lot easier once we've identified those in the setup. It makes it so much easier to make a simpler stroke once the setup is approved. And so when it comes to the stroke, we're just swinging back and through. And sometimes I'll put a tee in the butt of the club, a golf tee in the butt of the club in the vent hole of the grip, and have a player notice how far it is from the lead forearm, the left forearm, a couple of inches. And they're going to watch the tee relative to the forearm as they make their stroke so that it doesn't move closer to it or further from it. They want to just maintain that relationship. So it's a back and through motion without any manipulation of the golf club. And very quickly, a person can improve that portion of it. And then it's just a matter of doing the same thing with the golf ball, even to the extent of watching the tee for a while to confirm that they're doing it. And with that kind of emotion, they're going to see great success. So they end up going with it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I really appreciate the visual cue aspect for self-directed learning and feedback, so immediate too. And the reason I'm so grateful you broke that down is because I often find, and I'm sure you would agree to this, is that when someone comes presenting, whether they diagnose themselves with the yips or they're in kind of just a rut of performance with those short putts, it's the fear and tension that take over that start preventing them from executing the fundamentals that set them up for success in the first place. So for those of you listening, if you are in a performance rut, you've struggled recently with short putts, short chips, let this be a reminder to go back to the basics. Focus on ensuring your physical and technical fundamentals are correct first. That gives you the greatest chance of executing successfully.
Yep, very, very well said. I always go back to the fundamentals. And I recall a story when I was a kid. I would be in the hallway, which had a tile floor. Mm-hmm. And a mirror, sliding glass mirror on the closet. And my mom would cook dinner, and I would just sit in front of the mirror and use the tile floor to work on my setup, my golf setup. And I'd work on the parallel lines for the target line and my foot line, and then I would look at perpendicular lines for where I wanted to position the club and aim the club face. And even to this day, I mean, I look at tour players, and they're constantly using alignment sticks all the time. And on the putting green, they're using putting mirrors, and they have tees, and they always seem to have something set up. But then when you look at the local golf course, very, very few amateurs are working on those things.
Yes, they just take 2 buckets of balls to the range and hope and pray.
Yes, exactly.
So one thing that stood out to me as I've gotten to know more about you and done my research is club-focused instruction. And to be frank, the concept and terminology was new to me. After reading a lot more from your content, it makes total sense. But I want to hear club-faced instruction. What is it? How does it differ from body feeling-based instruction?
Sure. So in motor learning, there's something called attentional focus, where we place our attention during some skill movement. We can focus our attention internally on the way the body's moving, or externally on the way the tools are moving in response to the environment. So, for example, if we were to be eating dinner together, would we be focusing on how our arms and wrists and elbows were moving to cut our steak? Or would we be focusing on using the fork and the knife to cut the steak? And we can use any example, from riding to driving a vehicle to throwing anything that we do in life. We generally focus on the tools and the task. We operate from an external focus of attention perspective. The brain is really good at that. It isn't so good at managing all of the movements of the body consciously. It does it subconsciously very easily, but not consciously. And so in golf, the majority of golf instruction is body focused or internally focused. Turn your hip, keep your left arm straight, turn your shoulders, flex your knee, right? There's all kinds of different, endless amounts of instructions on what the body should do. Partly that is because the golf club is moving so quickly, upwards to 100 miles an hour, to where it's very difficult to see. it's hard to watch someone play golf and see what the golf club is doing. And so people have resorted to body focus instruction. But when we start looking at what the golf club should be doing and we start instructing players on what the club should do during the swing, as I've kind of alluded to throughout some of our conversation, number one, it becomes more clear. And number two, a person can achieve it more simply, more easily, because it aligns with the way the human brain operates. And it's very familiar with the way we've learned and done other skills.
Where do slow motion swings have a place in your coaching and teaching philosophy?
So for me personally, I do a lot of slow motion swings, and I teach players to make a lot of slow motion swings.
Okay.
I was just in our indoor facility this morning working with a few players, and every single one of them, I had them remove the golf ball and work on slow motion swings, giving them very clear instructions on what to do with the golf club. And a lot of it had to do with just getting set up correctly and then managing their setup position, maintaining their setup position, the way the shaft and the forearms formed a capital Y, and then the way the club face was perpendicular to that arm line. I had them go slow enough to where they could identify whether or not they were actually doing it. And then reminded them that, hey, in golf, we want to control the club face to within a couple of degrees. You have to go slow enough to tell whether or not you're doing it correctly within a couple of degrees. And from what I saw, they improved drastically. Number one, they understood what to do. The instructions were more clear. And number two, their whole body movement changed. It improved. And I would video it and show them. And they said, yeah, that looks normal. That looks like what I would want to do. I said, great, keep doing it. Interestingly, though, I have heard from other instructors, people who are knowledgeable in the motor learning and motor development space, who do seem to believe there's some research that says slow motion swings might not be as valuable because they don't simulate the actual motion itself. So I'm curious to learn a little bit more about that. But personally, I do use a lot of slow motion practice, and I have seen a lot of evidence to continue to do so.
And I'm so glad you bring up there is another point to consider. And I can tell you're very research focused. You'll let the research kind of guide and bring up, updated, informed opinions. And it's interesting. Are you familiar with the name Jim Waldron?
I am familiar with the name, yeah.
Okay, so he was my first real introduction. He has, both 30-second and then 60-second swings, so super slow and super duper slow, if you will. And hearing you echoed a lot of what he shared, which was really validating for me just to hear it from multiple experts here. So I'm interested to learn more as well what the further research will show about why it may not be quite as effective simulating the actual swing we utilize on the course. Fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the club face is so valuable. The TrackMan and launch monitors, they measure what the ball and the club do. They're measuring the external portion of it. We know that the club face accounts for so much of the starting direction, between 80 and 90% of the motion, of the direction. And so when we take a player just halfway back in the backswing and ask them, is that club face square? It's very rare that they can say yes or no. They're not sure. Yeah. Square to what? Right? It's certainly not square to the target because, as we mentioned, it moves around. But if we can start to evaluate the club face relative to us or relative to the arc of the swing, we could start to identify it being square or open or closed. And I think the more clear a person gets on that, the more quickly they're going to reach their goal because now their practice has much more purpose to it.
Incredibly well said. And then on that note, that purpose, that goal, somebody listening right now who is shooting consistently in the 90s and is destined to break through into the 80s and perhaps also into the 70s, someone making the transition from 90s to 80s, where do you recommend they start spending more of their practice and their intention and their training?
I would recommend for most, assuming we're talking physical skills, they're going to need to make sure that they have a clear concept of the swing, which is a lot of what we've been discussing. And then from there, they have to start it on swings small enough and slow enough to do it correctly. even doing slow swings and then jumping right into the full swing, working on driver, it's probably not going to transfer very well because it's too fast and they want the ball to go too far.
Yeah.
And so putting is a great place. I do like to help players start with putting, but sometimes they don't want to do that. And so I am okay with chipping and pitching in half swings, right?
Okay.
Everything that the eyes can actually see is pretty good. Anything that I would describe as a fundamentally sound golf swing is probably very familiar. People are very familiar with it with putting because the putting stroke moves slowly. They can watch the putter. They have a lot more idea of what the putter should do as opposed to the other clubs. And so from waist high to waist high, we can still visually see that quite nicely. And so I would recommend players to take their putting stroke and expand it to a half swing, waist high to waist high, and maintain these principles. And then from there, learn to allow the wrist to hinge and the club head to go behind their field of vision, which then requires proprioception of knowing where the club is in space as opposed to actually seeing it. So it is more difficult there, obviously.
Talk to me about what's the purpose, if any, and I'll just preface it with that, this is me asking naively, of adding strategic pauses throughout your swing. And if you find them beneficial, how do you implement them in your training and coaching?
I do it all of the time, and I recommend my players to do it as well. There's usually a point in their swing where they're manipulating the golf club.
Okay.
For example, during transition, a lot of times players will take the club back and then they start to pull on the club. They're told they want lag or they want shaft lean or they want whatever. And so they start pulling on the club. And so the motion goes from swinging or a circular motion to now a linear pulling action. In doing so, they sometimes open the club face, the club gets off a plane, the club gets laid off. They manipulate the club. And so in a scenario like that, I might have them take the club to the end of the backswing, pause. Usually they have to pause longer than they think initially, and then make the forward swing without any additional backswing. Mm-hmm. Right? They can't like crank it back one more time and then get back to their normal swing again. So they have to actually pause and then just go forward with it. And it's not going to go as far. It's not going to be as fast. I mean, those are normal things, but it's going to be how they create a new motor program.
Okay, excellent. I'm on the verge of a better understanding before I implement them, but I'm seeking more knowledge on how and when and why to add the strategic pause, and that's a very helpful example. So a little bit of a selfish question there, but I'm sure beneficial for many listeners. And shifting gears a little bit, if you could have one gigantic billboard with anything on it positioned on the golf course for all golfers to see, regardless if they're on 1, 13, or 18, what would it say and why?
That's an interesting question. I'm sure I could write down a list of things and then narrow it down. But what's coming to mind, there's a few things that come to mind. One of them is focus on what you want to do as opposed to what you fear might happen. I think a lot of players stand on a tee box and they see the ball going out of bounds, or they fear messing up in front of their buddies, or like we talked about with the yips, it's no different. And so we oftentimes have the wrong mental image. And if we could just replace it with the correct one, we're going to be okay.
I love that. A great reminder for all skill levels and ages. And also a reminder on top of that too, when you sit there and you tell yourself, don't do this, don't hit it in the water, don't hit it in the bunker, your subconscious literally doesn't register the word no. So you need to take that into consideration. It's literally just hearing, do hit it into the water, do hit it into the bunker. And your subconscious wants to make your thoughts real. So keep that in mind. Be intentional and mindful in your word choice and your focus. And I want to shift gears here because I know you are an avid player and competitor yourself. Again, somehow you find the time to wear 15 different hats, and I applaud you and I admire you for that. Tell us a little bit more. At what point in your playing career did it really click to you that you had the potential to be, for lack of a better word, one hell of a golfer?
I grew up playing when I was pretty young. So I would say I started when I was 7-ish by riding along in the cart with my dad. I remember us as a family being on the range, learning to play together. I remember playing in a tournament at my local course when I was 10. And that's a pretty vivid moment, actually. It was, I remember kind of the holes that we played, and I really enjoyed the game. I was hooked when I had that competitive feel to it. And then the following year, I played a whole season on the junior tour, and I won most every tournament I played in, except for when this other player played, and he won all of them when he was in the field. So I would say, I knew I was pretty good, but there was always players who were better than me. At the local level, there was always a handful of players who were just better. And when I got to high school, same thing. When I didn't go to a big school, I went and played at a junior college in Kansas, and I had some pretty good success. But I don't know if I had the work ethic of them or the discipline, maybe the discipline. And then I tried playing professionally for a little while, and same thing. I mean, there's just so many really, really, really good golfers all over the world. But I from when I was 11, I knew I was pretty good at it. Yeah.
Okay. And on the horizon in 2025, is there continued tournament and competition aspirations?
Yeah, I still compete. By no means the amount that I used to or I would like to. I work a full-time job for the university. I teach and operate a coaching business secondarily, and then I'm raising a young family. And so I continue to say, I hope my kids get into golf so that maybe we can play as a family. So my 8-year-old has asked to play in a junior tournament this summer. The 10-year-old has played in a few this year. So we'll see. Maybe we could do a little bit of golf as a family. And so the preparation for tournaments would be a little bit easier, because that's the hard part, is preparing for the tournaments. I'll play in a couple of our majors, a couple of our team events within our section. I always want to prepare for our section championship, which is a qualifier for the national championship, which is a qualifier for the PGA championship. So that's a huge deal. And I saw just recently that the PGA has plans to take it to Bandon Dunes in 2026. So I'm going to be working pretty hard at my game in 25 to get ready for the qualifier to hopefully make it. It would be my third time playing in that event, but first time ever being to Bandon Dunes. So.
Okay, outstanding. And I'm curious, you may not have an answer to this question. Is there an unusual habit, a superstition, or an absurd thing you do to prepare or during a competitive round of golf?
I'm not too superstitious. I prepare as much as I can, which is very limited. I try to. I use a special coin. I use a coin for on Saturday, God willing, I will celebrate 5 years of sobriety. Okay. And so I use my sobriety coin. For the last 5 years, I've done that. And that's a good reminder, a good grounding element to remember that, hey, there's other things in life more important than this game. And my sobriety comes first over the results I have on the golf course.
I love that. And congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah, very neat. And I'm curious too, just knowing how much you value and continue your knowledge and learning of all aspects of the game. Is there anything in the last 5 years, a belief, a behavior, an approach to teaching that you've changed your mind on?
I would say that I have gotten more, I've become more aware of the value of coaching the person first and the golfer second. I have to gain their trust. They have to respect me and what I say enough to actually implement it. And so I've been spending a little bit more time getting to know the person, and guiding them to where I want them to be, as opposed to just telling them, just do this, right? And kind of force feeding it to them. So I think getting to know the person first, coaching the person. There's a lot more to life and golf and playing well than just hitting good shots. I mean, we have to be in a good mental space to play well.
Absolutely. And to wrap us up, I mean, this has been nothing short of a phenomenal conversation. I'm so excited to share it. So grateful you've joined me. I'm curious, partially a selfish question. I'll be the first to admit it, but I know it will help the listeners. For someone listening who is truly committed to becoming a scratch golfer and having worked with such a breadth of individuals of skill and experiences in your life, is there one particular message, reminder, or piece of advice you would share with him or her to guide them on that journey and commitment?
I work with a lot of college students that are low handicap golfers. They have to be a 12 handicap or better just to get into the program. Mm-hmm. If they're a 12, I'm working with them to pass their playing ability test. The PGA of America has a playing ability test to become a member. It's basically breaking 80 twice in the same day, depending on the course rating, of course. And then a lot of our players are scratch or close to scratch. And the difference between the two, in my opinion, from watching for the last 10 years, is the amount of time that they spend playing and practicing the game. To become a scratch golfer, a person is going to be in the top, 1 or 2 or so % of golfers in the world. That's a significant achievement. Mm-hmm. It takes many, many hours. I mentioned the amount of time and hours that I played as a kid growing up. Most of the time, sun up to sundown in the summer, playing 36 holes a day, sometimes 54 holes a day, walking as a 12 or 13-year-old. And then seeing people who took up the game later in life and thinking that they can play once a week and practice twice a week and become a scratch golfer is just not accurate. And so we might look at fitness as a comparative. I mean, if a person has a lot of weight to lose, they might lose it fairly quickly at first, but then as they get more and more fit, it gets more and more difficult. And so as we start lowering our handicap, it becomes really, really difficult to shave those extra strokes. And becoming a scratch golfer is probably similar to someone who has very, very low body fat and a six-pack.
Yeah, right. I love that analogy. You're speaking to the old dietitian in me, so I love that. I think it's so relatable.
Yeah, it takes a significant amount of work to become a scratch golfer. And you have to hit the ball far.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think that's so valuable for so many reasons, but also just recognizing and accepting it's going to be challenging. Because when you accept that, and just listen closely here, it becomes easier because the acceptance is going to be this intense challenge automatically begins to prepare you if you're willing to accept the challenge and remain committed to the achievement.
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, I think when we have more realistic expectations, a more clear path, it does become a little bit easier because now we're in line with what it's actually going to take.
So well said. Yeah, it's like you took the words out of my mouth. I love that. And Henry, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us. Where can listeners go to connect with you, learn from you, and even to potentially work with you?
Sure. So I would say Instagram is probably the easiest, at Henry Stetina Golf. I have a website as well. A person can go to henrystetinagolf.com, search up all the different things that I have to offer, reach out directly. I do some in-person lessons, not a whole lot. I mostly work with kids and I mostly coach college students becoming PGA of America golf professionals. And so if someone's looking to pursue a career in the golf industry, that would be an area that we can discuss taking them. But yeah, I think the internet, Instagram is a great place.
Okay. Outstanding. Well, thank you again. And for those of you listening, thank you for tuning in to another episode. I know you found immense value in today's episode. So first and foremost, go share it with a fellow golfer who is truly committed to becoming the best golfer possible. And second, go listen to this episode again. Henry shared a wealth of information that is worth hearing 2, 3, 4 more times. And if you haven't done so, taking 30 seconds to leave a genuine rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify is greatly appreciated. Thank you again for listening. Have a fantastic week of both practice and play. Hit them straight, and we'll catch you in the next episode.